A quick announcement for not the kids, but the parents, because kids don't really have any control over themselves. So if the parents can really settle their children down, that'll be wonderful, so that we can get on with the program and not disturb the program whilst it's going on. And through the program, if the parents could really do us a favor and keep an eye on their kids. Can you hear me, Tawfiq? No? Is this better? Brilliant. So, as I was saying, if we can request the parents through the program to keep an eye on the kids so that we can derive maximum benefit from the program as it goes on. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand over now to, who's going first? Dr. Shahid Murali, who's blessed us with his presence, and hopefully we're going to benefit from his insights about the practical issues with regards to sighting the crescent. Please.
Assalamu alaikum. I am today's warm-up act, and today I want to cover two things, please. I'd like to cover firstly why we see the moon, and secondly I'd like to cover how we see the moon. And to do this, I want to have a lot of fun and make it very practical. So I'd like to invite, if people are on the periphery, just to come in a little bit into the inside. I think you'll benefit more from it when we're all together. I'm about to turn the lights off here. If you think that might be difficult for any of the kids, you can always use your phones on your mobile or something, just a little bit more. And I'll explain what we're going to do. So here we have the sun. You guys can all stay in your role as earthlings, and I'm going to be the moon, okay? I'm going to be the moon here. Sorry? Oh, no, yeah, we'll see in a moment. We're going to see the moon in a moment. And can I please ask now that we turn off all... Actually, we've got a few more people coming in, so if I can ask people just to come in, settle down, come in the middle, please. And can you please turn off the lights beside the fire extinguisher, so we have it in total darkness? Oh, yeah, everything. We'll have everything off, please. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. Okay, so what we're going to... I'd like to just demonstrate and simulate now how the moon phases are throughout the lunar month. Okay? And we're going to begin when the sun, this is the sun, and the moon and the earth, which is you guys, are all in the same line. And this is the point of conjunction. A kind of a lay term for this is the birth of the moon. And because the moon orbits the earth, what then happens is that the moon will come this way and continue to orbit. And I'm going to walk around now, and I'd like you to keep an eye on the moon so you can see the different phases of the moon as I walk around. And I'm hoping around about now, as I'm coming away, you'll see the reflection of the crescent moon as I'm walking around. I'm going to come around you guys here. So now we're around about a quarter of the way through the month. Keep an eye on the moon, please. And now we are halfway through the lunar month. So you'll see here what looks like the full moon. And now we're coming towards the next phase of the moon. Thank you, guys. So we're about 3/4 away now. And now you're seeing the waning moon. And as we come back here, you'll see the crescent beginning to disappear as we enter the next moon cycle. And we're here, back at the point of conjunction. And so when the earth, the moon, and the sun are all in the same line, the moon is not visible. So the next thing I'd like to consider is why it is that we can see the crescent. Because this is the critical point here, isn't it? It's after the birth, so after the point of conjuncture, when we first can sight the crescent. there's a few things that determine when we can actually see the crescent. Can you guys see the crescent from over here? Yeah? So one factor is the distance, the angular spread, the angle between the sun and the moon. That's known as the elongation. The bigger the elongation, the bigger the distance between the separation between the sun and the moon, the more light reflects off the side of the moon back to you guys on Earth, enabling you to see the moon. And that's partly determined by how long ago the moon was born, or the age of the moon from the beginning of the lunar cycle. Now, another factor in being able to see it is its position. Now, I've simplified this. I've just shown the moon going round the Earth, but actually, you guys on Earth keep spinning. So the moon continuously sets and rises too. So another factor that makes it difficult to see the crescent is when it's too close to the horizon, and it disappears from your view because it disappears beneath the horizon. So we have the angular spread, the elongation. We have how high it is above the horizon, that's the elevation, and how much of the moon is being reflected back to you guys. Now, I know this is blinding, and actually it's deliberately so, because the sun is so intense in its light. And another difficulty is that the sun, even when the sun has set, even when it's below the horizon, it's shining its light into the atmosphere, illuminating the atmosphere, and making the moon more difficult to see, because to see the moon, the crescent has to be brighter than the relative brightness of the sky, which is being illuminated by the sun. And so we have these different predictability curves. Now, if we have the moon here, and you can see the elongation, and you can see it's above the horizon, all of you on Earth are in slightly different locations on Earth. So for you guys here, I expect that you can probably see the crescent. But I expect that you guys here probably can't see the crescent, or can't see it as well. And that's because you're all in different locations. And this is my interpretation of what Ali Reza is going to speak a little bit more about, horizons. So over here, you can see it with a higher probability, and there's a different probability for you guys in the middle, and then for you guys over here, you have a different probability, a different likelihood of seeing the crescent because of all those different factors, the elongation, the elevation, and all those other things. And this is why we have the different colors on the moon sighting curves, because they are all different areas of probability of being able to see the crescent. And so I wanted to explain the lunar cycle, why we see the moon in different shapes throughout the lunar month because of the reflection from the sun. I wanted to explain what determines when we can first see the crescent moon, and I wanted to explain what is meant by horizons. So that was the first part of my talk. The second part of my talk, can I ask please for the lights all to be flicked back on now? Thank you, Mohammed. The second part of what I wanted to talk about today was how we see the moon. Okay, I've enjoyed going out to see the moon now for about 15-ish years. It's lovely to be there in the middle of the countryside, and you settle down and you're watching the horizon, and you see the sun's disk just dip beneath the horizon, and then you perform your Maghrib prayer, and you get your food out, and then you're sitting there looking up at the sky to see the first crescent. And there's something really beautiful about being that connected to nature. And in fact, it's really exciting and fun when you actually see the crescent. And I was looking back at my computer files, because it was back in 2009 when we were in a similar position to what we are for the next moon, for tomorrow night, when there was a tiny possibility of seeing the moon, the crescent. And we had organized from Clifton Road Mosque for loads of different teams to go out all across the city to look for the moon. And Now I'm glad because my family, my kids really enjoy doing it. So it's become a family tradition. The first obligatory component is that we have to call up the pizza shop and get a pizza. Go out to the countryside and sit there looking out for the crescent. And it's really good. It's really good fun. I want to explain briefly how you could look for that yourselves, and then a little bit more of a technical explanation. When you're out, you've got a view to the horizon. You'll see the sun setting, and it sets there. Keep an eye on where it sets, because I want you to look in a similar place, just to the left and just a little bit up for the new crescent. If you want, you can use your sky map apps just to see exactly where the moon will be. I personally prefer to use a precise calculation of its direction and its elevation. And I've got a handout for you, if you want to, that you can, I'm going to pass this around. It's got a QR code on it. So please just hand it round. And if anybody wants the handout, just scan it in. You'll download it to your phone. And along with a kind of a more technical explanation of what to do, what to look out for, and where to look, and how to calculate where the moon will be, I've also given a list of 12 locations that we've scouted, that we've been to, and people from mosque have been to over the years, that are beautiful locations out in the countryside. They've all got Google Map pins, so you can have a look at the locations and see where you might want to go for yourself, whether that's tomorrow or any other day. So I'm going to start passing this round, and for any questions about the first component, why we see the moon, or the second component, how we see the moon, we can cover that in the question and answer session after. So thank you very much. I'm going to pass this round just in case you want to scan it.
Thank you, Shahid, for that presentation. I think from next year, inshallah, we can make this an annual T4C event as well, get the families involved, and yeah, part of our program, inshallah. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So I'm going to look at this slightly differently. I'll be looking at, and the question was, why are there differences amongst the Shia ulama? So what I'll be looking at is a very brief overview of the different views and the justifications. It's nothing academic, neither do we go into detail. It's a very simple overview. Within 15 minutes, I'll cover a few points. I appreciate that the fiqh discussions get very complicated, which I'm not going to touch on. So I will, we can join on slido.com. The hashtag is moon, where I will ask the first question and then we can go into the discussion. So once we're in now, the first question I'd like to ask you guys is, why do you think there are differences, according to you, in the rulings regarding the start of the month with regard to the moon? Okay, so different people, unity of horizon, multiplicity of horizon, two primary issues, the horizon, the method, there's so many factors, difference of different maraja, different understanding of what's been said in the Quran, based on citing with or without optical aid or calculations. Can we take into account calculated theoretical views? So we get a rough idea of why there are different opinions amongst the scholars. What I want to look at is how these differences in a very short period of time are able, we look at these differences and how they come about. Is it too low? Still, it's not. It's fine. You can hear. Okay. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay, so we do have differences. No, it's fine, it's fine. We were in a situation like this a few weeks ago. Absolutely understandable with kids. So there are different opinions in determining the start of the month. And that could be depending on the jurist's understanding, it's his premises, and how he deduces the rulings with regard to the texts. So a rough overview of the different criteria of determining the beginning of the month. One is the birth of the moon. So as soon as the moon is born, that's considered to be the start of the month. Then there is the birth plus the possibility of sighting. So the birth plus the possibility of sighting without actually sighting it. Yeah, you don't have to actually go and sight the moon, but the fact that it's possibly there, it's sightable, that's enough. Sayyid Fallallah, Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, Kamal al-Haydari. Then you have ICCI, which is the International Center for Collective Ijtihad. There is the link over there, collectiveijtihad.org, which outlines in English the justification of this criteria. Then there is the actual sighting of the moon. You have to go and see the moon with your own eyes. Now again, even there is a difference of interpretation. Do you have to actually go and see with your own eyes? Are you allowed to use optical aid, like Khamenei says? Or some actually say that only binoculars is a permitted way of optical aid, like Sayyid Mahmoud al-Hashimi. So, for example, Sayyid Sistani, you need to see the moon, but if there are factors such as cloudiness or anything else, you're allowed to resort to the calculation or to sort of if the moon can't be sighted. However, if according to Sayyid Sistani, it needs to be so clear, if there are no impediments, that anybody who goes up can see the moon. So that's roughly the different criteria. Now going into the evidences that are used, if we start off with the Quran and 2:185, I'll read the bold part. فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَسُمْهُ. Whoever witnesses, for those who witness the month, then he should fast. Now the majority of the Shia scholars do not rely on this verse in deducing the rules of moonsighting, because this verse, whilst it has been interpreted as whoever sights the moon, then he should start. But if you look, it says, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ, whoever witnesses the month. And وَمَنْ كَانَ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ. The majority of Shia scholars have interpreted this as whoever witnesses the month, whoever is in the month and witnesses it, then he should fast. Whoever is sick or is traveling, he has not really witnessed the month, and hence he shouldn't fast. There is another verse, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ. They ask you about the crescents. There are times for people. And this also influences certain juristic views in interpreting rules for the moon sighting. Now the other evidence, textual evidence, is the hadith. And there are many narrations according on this line. So I'll just read this. Sum lirru'ya wa aftir lirru'ya. Imam Sadiq says, fast with the sighting and break the fast with the sighting. Again, there are many narrations to this regard. There are certain narrations that mention, do not use your own opinion. وَلَيْسَ بِالرَّأْيِ وَلَا التَّذَنِّي. And there are many other discussions that are held with regard to this. Now, one of the things that the ahadith actually critique is the using of hisab or astronomers. Now, one can argue that at the time of the Prophet, the astronomy wasn't really advanced to the level that we have it. So hence, this is a discussion that we can have later on. But at the core of the discussion, so we have the same texts available to all these mujtahids. We have the same sort of ahadith and the same Quranic verses. Yet there is diversity in interpreting these texts. And at the core of it comes the term ru'ya. Because the hadith says, Sum lirru'ya wa aftir lirru'ya. Fast with the sighting of the moon and break the fast with the sighting of the moon. So is this sighting a means to actually determine whether the moon is out there, or is it the subject matter that we have to sight? Based on this, there is interpretation that if we can determine that the moon is there, the sighting is just a means to determine the start of the month, which is dictated by the crescent. And hence, if we have ways of determining this, we can then declare, or we can use those means to declare the start of the month. Calculations, optical aid, etc. So this is a rough overview of why there are differences in terms of that criteria. Then we come to, and again here there is the notion, so for example, using of optical aid, there is the common usage or what's known as urf. If you are to tell somebody who has sighted the moon with an optical aid, have you seen the moon? And they will say, yes, I've seen the moon. Even though they used an optical aid, you would still consider that as seeing the moon. So this is for those who accept that and say that, look, even if you see the moon with an optical aid, it is still seeing. And hence, we have a difference of opinion. So going back to it, depending on the marja's outlook, their understanding of the text, the premises that they're building upon the arguments, they come up with different rulings. And I'm not here to say one ruling is right over another. I'm just giving you an overview of how these differences come about. Now that the moon is sighted, the other question comes about, where can that sighting of the moon be applicable? So number one, Sayyid Khouy and many others of his students are of the opinion that if the moon is sighted somewhere, then anywhere in the world that shares the night, you can apply the start of the month to that, right? And this, he uses justification of narrations. He uses, we recite in the Eid namaz that we have made Eid for the Muslimin. In addition to this, there is the understanding of the mujtahid of how the moon works. And that influences the way the mujtahid may bring about ruling. Another view, which is not a very mainstream view, is that if the moon is sighted in the three continents, Asia, Europe, and Africa, which is Al-Alam Al-Qadim, the old world, then it's sufficient for those areas. Why? Because the narrations mention, or when the time of the Imams or the Prophet were there, they were only in those regions that was applicable. People were living in that region. So hence anywhere outside that, the hadith is not applicable to that. Again, this is a very minority view. Prior to Khoi, the opinion which was popular was Ayatollah Gulpaigani's opinion that if the moon is seen in the east, example in India or in Iran or somewhere there, then by priority anywhere in the west would be declared as the month has started. This is because if you've seen the moon charts, the moon starts from the west to the east. And then there is the local sighting. This is known as the multiplicity of horizons, and the different horizons, according to Sayyid Sistani, that you need to be in a particular horizon. The moon needs to be sighted in that horizon for it to be applicable. It's only applicable to that horizon that shares the sighting of the moon, and also criteria is longitude and latitude. Now again, Sayyid Sistani's opinion is he has narrations that back his view up, and also an understanding of how the moon works. The moon works like the sun, and if it's sighted, it's only sighted in certain places when it rises. So these are the different opinions, and with the local sighting, again, the horizons change according to the year. If you look at the moon charts, you can see the angles changing. So Sayyid Sistani's opinion, and those that are like his, is that the horizon would change depending on those charts. So overall, I will end with this slide, and then we will open up to a Q&A. Is that what's the role of astronomical data? So for those who say we can follow it, like the first two opinions, birth of the moon plus possibility of sighting, what the conclusion is that we can set the calendar for years in advance. Ayatollah Kamal al-Haidari and others have declared Eid, or even have declared the start of Ramadan well in advance. ICCI has also done that. So the astronomical data can be used, according to these two opinions, to set in advance also. The other view of astronomical data is that data can have the ability of refutation but not establishing. What this means is that if somebody says, for example, that the moon is sighted, as we have in the start of the month, it was sighted, or is claimed to be sighted, in Saudi Arabia. Astronomical data shows that it's impossible to sight it. So hence, one school of opinion is that we can use astronomical data to refute this. So hence we can't start the month because it's impossible to sight it. But we can't use astronomical data to establish the starting of the month. So this is a rough overview of the different opinions. Again, I'm not going into detail. It's a lengthy discussion, different nuances that are there in the fiqh texts. But I'll keep it at this, and we'll open up to Q&A. So if we can ask Sheikh Shaidan. Okay. So if there's any clarification on these slides, mine and Shahid's, if not, then if you want to have a general discussion, then we'll invite Sheikh on board. No, ask. ICCI, International Center for Collective Ijtihad. So it's a group of scholars here at Al-Mahdi Institute. We have a few mujtahids on this panel, which we have discussion on certain issues. The website is collectiveijtihad.org. So we thrash out discussions as a collective body, and we also include experts in the field. So for example, there have been discussions on fasting and medical exemptions of fasting, etc. So we've used medical experts who are on an equal level in the discussion, and then a fatwa or a majority opinion, a minority opinion is given based on that discussion. So these discussions happen throughout the year. There's a lot of back and forth, Q&A, refining opinions, and then it's put onto the website. So collectiveijtihad.org, you can see how it works there also.
Thank you, Shaykh Ali Reza and Dr. Shahid, for two brilliant presentations of different types. And as Ali Reza mentioned, if there are any questions with regards to this latest presentation, which explore the different views and different opinions, or of the earlier presentation, which dealt with some of the practical issues of sighting the crescent, then both of our esteemed guests can answer them now. Is there any questions? There's one question with Sajid at the back. I don't know if the... Yeah, okay, you want to go ahead and ask?
The first opinion. Okay, so the question is, does anyone believe in the birth of the moon? So the Sayyid Fadlullah's old opinion was that, and I believe Shaykh Arif also believes in that. I don't know, Shaykh, do you know of anyone else who believes in the birth of the moon? No.
Dr. Shabir has a question.
Thank you very much for the presentation. There are two pieces of evidence. One was the Quranic ayah, and one was the hadith of the Quranic ayah. Surely there must be lots of other evidence. Is there any way where we can get a look at the evidence last hour? See, for the context of the evidence. Because I understand that hadith was when the king brought time and said that in our hour, the astronomer and the astrologers are saying the beginning of the month of Ramadan. And that's why he said that, which is to counteract that particular point. I think the context is very different. It wasn't to say, look for the moon in every opinion, it just counteract them, because that was the most relevant thing. So I think it is very
Sure. Yeah, so the question is, or the comment is, that is there any place where we have these evidences available? I assume in English, right? There's a lot in Arabic and Farsi and stuff, but yeah, so in English, I believe there was one of Sayyid Sistani's that was translated into English, where he has the evidences, and also there is on the Collective Ijtihad website, we can put the link up on the group or something. There is a few evidences there. The context, there's talk about astronomers, a minority and majority opinion, and a few narrations there, which can give an idea of what's going on. There is also one's understanding of interpreting words to mean in a certain way, and also there is the science of or understanding of how the moon works, which may influence one's deduction. So yeah.
for education. How often do you think only for Ramadan and Eid,
So the question is do I only go out in the month of Ramadan and show out? Yeah, To be honest, that's what I do, and that's just me maybe being a bit lazier. But what's interesting is that in the last maybe 10 years, there's been a movement of all Muslims from all different schools of thought wanting to perform local moon sightings. So in most cities now, there are local moon sighters affiliated with many different mosques. And there is a movement now to have more of a UK or regional-based calendar. So there is one organization called moonsighting.org.uk, and they wish to have a regional moon sighting calendar, and they organize for people to go out every single month, and their criteria are as long as it's visible in our region, which includes as far as Morocco. Another group is the New Crescent Society. Similarly, they've got lots of local active people going out to see the moon every month, and they are advocating a more locally based calendar, very much specific to the UK horizon. So they are kind of advocating for a Tuesday Eid, interestingly, because we haven't seen that from other schools of thought before. So whilst I am not going out every single month, I think I would encourage people to do that, because there's something very, I find it lovely, because I see it as the sunnah to go and sight the crescent. And I think it's a lovely experience. And I would encourage everyone to do that as often as they possibly can.
So those groups, are they for Muslims of different persuasions and denominations, or coming together, is it? Brilliant. The question over there.
So, can you just, there was a question about the results. What could you? What my experiences of it? When you see the moon curves and it looks like it is visible under good condition, it is clearly visible, then you can see it. And when you have those ambiguous times when it's only visible in perfect conditions, I haven't. Or when you can only see it with an optical aid, again, it's really difficult. And I think a lot of the reason is maybe because of our atmospheric conditions and maybe the weather. But then weather is so changeable, and you could be in a location 20 miles away and see it because you have a clear horizon. And this is when the crowdsourcing community comes together to be able to have lots of people at different vantage points being able to see it.
So over your 15 years, there might have been times where a few of you in that group said, that's the moon, and a few of you said, no, you can't see it.
I've not been in that position.
No? Okay.
I think when it's visible, you can see it.
Okay.
And I've not even been in a position where somebody can see it with an optical aid, somebody can't see it with their eye. It's there, or it's difficult to see.
We had a question from the brother over there. Yeah. Islam.
Thank you very much. My question is for anyone, when you're considering different locations and whether or not they share the same horizon, when the locations are quite close together, it's quite intuitive whether or not clear. Can you explain the methodology to determine whether or not two locations, which are geographically quite far apart, share the same horizon?
So since you were explaining the difference of horizons, I'll send the mic your way.
So I think that's determined by the astronomers and the charts.
Questions.
Oh, the question is, how do you determine the horizon? It changes every year. So if you look at the charts, the angles change. So if you've seen the chart, it goes like this, right? But if you compare 2 years of them, they aren't really in a straight line. So they either tilt up or down. So that the horizons, at least according to some Maraja, are determined, who believe in that theory, is determined by the longitude, latitude, and also those the chart, the sightability charts, which change year on. Yes. Yeah.
So just to expand on what Shaykh Ali R Khaki said, and also to answer the question further, the question is are there charts that determine what a horizon is? In fact, my understanding is that the charts are what the horizon are. I'll explain that a bit more. So the charts show different colors of different bands of places where you can see the moon with different levels of probability. And a horizon, in my understanding, is defined by areas that share the same probability of it being sighted. So therefore, even when a location can be quite far away, if they share the same color band, then my understanding is that they share the same horizon. And in the same way, while it might be intuitive that a location quite proximate might be in the same horizon, it might not be, because they may have different probabilities, even in quite a close area, of being and not being able to see the moon. And I think that what would be determined by it, the same probability of being able to see it.
That the moon would be sighted. So technically my parents would have done E, because we in Birmingham just slightly further north than we, than we partially see it.
That's right. So it's just an expansion on that. If in northern Europe, in France, it can be seen, but then in Birmingham it can't be, then they would be classed as two different horizons, because there's different probabilities of them being able to be seen in France and in Birmingham. But then I might go further. I saw on your slides of Ayatollah Ghul Peghani and his deduction that if it's seen in one location, then it must necessarily be seen in another location. It may not always be the case that if it's seen in the east, it's seen in the west. But in some cases, if the moon curves follow, that if it is seen in one location with a similar probability or a lesser probability of being seen, then in another location with the same or a higher probability of it being seen, then it would necessarily be seen in that location. So if it's seen in one location on those different color bands, then it's likely that it would be seen in another location even far away in the same color band, because it shares the same probability of sightability.
Dr. Abbas had a question.
The scientific probability of its so accurate now that gives the need to see the result. And also, if you also extrapolate that, for example, and it might be completely very later to sense, but if you argue that you don't go out and see the position of the sun in red times, so you don't go out and see the exact sunset can you then extrapolate that and do the same for the sight of the moon as well?
You're asking a very personal opinion of the first one.
My personal opinion. No, I just general thoughts on so the question is there a necessity to actually sight the moon when we have data that can accurately tell us that the moon is there and sightable? So yes, there is the opinion, the second opinion, which I outlined. They believe that you don't actually have to see the moon, because it's there, we have the data, and the data is quite accurate, despite the hadith saying that at the time of the Prophet, for example, do not rely on astronomers' views, because astronomy at that time wasn't very accurate. It's only in the past few years that we have accurate data on being unable to predict when the crescent can be seen. So yeah, there is a view out there that says that you don't actually have to go see the moon. The fact that we have data and it's sightable, that's enough, even if no one in the world sees it.
I think, Dr. Shahid, can you tell us what we're looking at here? I'm going to move out of the way as well, because I know
So just to explain what I was talking about a little bit earlier, these different color bands are all different areas of the same probability of being able to see the moon. So in this case, the south of England shares the same probability as France, but not the same as northern England. And we have different levels of probability of these different, as I understand them to be, horizons by which you can see the moon throughout the world. And so if we're here, they all have their own key. So we're in Birmingham, we're kind of in the middle between this yellow and this green band. only visible with binoculars or conventional telescopes, or visible to the unaided eye after found with the optical aid. And that's where we are here. Now, even with communities of moonsighters, this whole area here is pretty difficult to see. The conditions have to be really perfect. And the different conditions are not just about, like I mentioned in the presentation, about the elongation and the how high up from the horizon. It also atmospheric conditions with regards to the weather, and also other things that aid visibility, such as our atmospheric moisture content, and then it becomes more difficult to see, or the amount of pollution, or the amount of dust and haze that there is in the environment, and all those things make it more difficult to be able to see. So this is not an exact science, and there are some times when people have said that they've seen the moon when it's more difficult than this, and there's other times when it said, well, actually, it is visible under perfect conditions. The conditions are perfect, but nobody sees the moon. So these aren't precise calculations.
Any other further questions or comments or thoughts? Hussein at the back. Islam.
Appreciate that the difference but what are the larger opinions of local communities doing celebrating the month of stars in different communities like this? Does the actual determination of how they define moving forward override that kind of community at a local level?
So, if I understand correctly, to what extent does unity of households or communities have an impact on how the marja can deduce the rulings? So, as far as I understand, they wouldn't see it as a problem as such that there is people who follow different maraja who come up with different days of Eid or even fasting. Because they are dedicated to the texts, and based on their assumptions they have come up with the conclusion that the start of the month must be deduced in a certain way. So for them it's not really problematic. Unless Sheikh, are there any scholars that believe unity overrides the start of the month? There isn't, so no, it isn't a factor.
It's not important, otherwise we take it into consideration. So how come, I mean, I'm not going to reply to this, but how come us, maybe we seem to attach so much importance to it to the extent that we want to do ourselves right and the other one wrong?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone has any comments, feel free.
It's to be fair, as Ali just said, each scholar is going to be loyal to the methodology in following the text, and if the text itself doesn't explicitly say about the unity of a community for determining Eid or whatever, then that's not going to be, taken as a factor. Even if someone might feel, a scholar might feel that unity of the community is important due to their own social upbringing, maybe, but in terms of the deduction of law is defined by text, then that's not going to be taken into as a factor anyway. Whether it is important or we see it as important, whether we are right to see it as important, if we are wrong to see it as important, that's something else. But the scholar will be loyal to their methodology of text. End of story. Even if they themselves see that as an important thing or not, is by the by.
Got a couple of questions on the live stream from Madagascar. I think we've already addressed the answers, but just in case you can add to it. So, is it not possible to unite all Shias for one Eid? And why are we trusting the astronomy in prayer times and not for the moon? I think
Is it possible to have unity was the question? Yeah, we said it's amongst Shias, not amongst Sunnis, not amongst Muslims. Because the Shias are the true. Anyway. But no, as we discussed, depending on the methodology that's used, it's very difficult to achieve that. What was the second one? We trust astronomy for prayer times, but we don't trust them for the moon. As I mentioned, there is an opinion that does rely on astronomical data in deducing the start or the crescent of the moon and hence the start of the month. So there are scholars that do subscribe to that.
Some Americans people actually have various opinions and maybe in the community but maybe aware of the most common opinion. If you look at the Risala, I've seen it written where these methods, but if you come to certainty by other means, then you can do that.
So yeah, in fact, Sayyid Sistani, okay. So the comment is that if somebody has certainty in something, then that's enough. Sayyid Sistani does say in his, I think it's 1699, ruling 1699, where he says that if somebody has certainty, he outlines the different ways of determining the start of the month, and one of them is that if he has certainty in a certain way of deducing the start of the month, and he has itmi'nan, he has certainty, then that's enough for him. That suffices for him.
Do you want to reply to this? Or?
You should come here. You should have equal rights. By the way, there's a discussion on women and sighting of the moon.
Some of the opinions are.
No, actually, in terms of sighting of the moon, women cannot sight the moon. That's a mainstream view. Use the other one. Use the other one. In locating the moon. Yeah, so the moon must, if for Sayyid Sistani, it needs to be so clear that if 1,000 people were to go up on the roofs, they would be able, if everything's the same, equal for them, they would be able to see the moon. The only, for him, with regard to the sighting of the moon, it must be there, and it shouldn't, if it's covered by like fog or smoke or something like that, then we can use astronomical data in seeing that it's there.
So you use astronomical data to identify that the moon is there, regardless of whether you can see it with your own eyes or not. Yeah.
Based, if there is obstacles in sighting the moon, yeah.
Two people who are in the same margin, then I know that in 2 feet of different things. If you trust that astronomical data, then other people don't know it. I don't trust the data, so I would either choose. Did I understand that right?
Yeah, so the question is, I'll direct this to Sheikh, yeah? The question is that, no, I'll just summarize it. The question is that if two followers of Sayyid Sistani, one has itmi'nan, that the moon has been sighted, or has used a means to discern that the moon is there, and the other one doesn't, then would they have two different days of Eid? Yes, they would, according to him. Yes. So it boils down to itminan then, right?
Any further questions or comments or thoughts?
Wendy.
Conversation about horizon is different to the rulings that we used to have about the way of sharing and right. That's different.
No, so Sayyid Hui believes in the unity of horizons. So the question is, the discussion on horizons that we are having, is that different to Sayyid Hui's opinion? So Sayyid Hui's opinion, he believes in the unity of horizon, i.e., if it's sighted in anywhere in the world, as long as the night is shared, that's all one horizon. Whereas the opinion of Sayyid Sistani is multiplicity of horizons. So the horizons are broken down into small. Yeah.
Use the scientific data to determine the horizon, but don't use the scientific data to determine the sun.
Not necessarily. They could work the other way around. So they have a hadith, and then they use a scientific understanding or an understanding. I don't know if you can call it scientific, but understanding to justify their opinions. It could work either way.
That's a scientific
Yeah. So they use that to get the understanding.
data
Yeah.
to impose their rules within those scientific defined horizons.
Yeah.
I think that might be a slightly. I'm saying this impartially. I think that might be a slightly unfair criticism, because or observation, because I think all those curves are showing are the similar areas of probability of sightability. Yes, but so I guess what Ali Raza is saying here is that the definition of the horizon is based on a similar probability, and that's what the Marja is stating. And then what we're seeing on the curves is how the scientists have determined that area of probability.
Yeah, last couple of questions. One at a time. Okay, so the question, if I'm right, is that the whole birth of the moon presentation we had makes sense, but does the Quran not say that the moon actually has to be sighted? I think we went through that already. Just want to recap from the Quran what you had said.
So you asked whether the Quran says you need to sight it with the naked eye. The Quran, the fact that there are different opinions based on the same texts shows that the text can be interpreted differently. So it isn't clear, and the Quran does not say that you need to sight it with your naked eyes. The Quran mentions ahilla, which is crescents, as points in time for people. The Quran mentions whoever witnesses the month. The Hadith mentions witnessing the moon, but none of them, even if they do mention it that you need to see it with your eye, it can be interpreted differently. What does it mean to interpret? And this is a discussion that is held in Usul al-Fiqh, linguistic discussions. How do you interpret a word? Ru'ya, for example, sighting. How can that be interpreted? Does it mean the ru'ya, the sighting at the time of the Prophet? Does it mean you ask somebody on the street, have you seen the moon? And even if they've seen with a telescope, they would consider it seeing the moon. So that's a linguistic discussion, and that's the richness in interpreting the laws. No, for him it's the local. It's the local. Yeah.
So a quick one, optical aid, spectacles.
No, it's not. Spectacles would not be considered optical aid, and some say that binoculars would not even be considered. Would be as though you're seeing it with your eyes. Yeah, that's why some would interpret. Yeah.
I've also seen on the topic of optical aids a distinction between conventional and non-conventional optical aids too, and I wonder if this might mean something to do with using lenses to magnify something, which is what telescopes and binoculars do. But to make the question that was asked a little bit more complicated about sighting it with your eye, the moment the moon comes out of the point of conjunction, and it's not visible at all to the eye, it's not visible at all to a telescope. If you were to use a different type of light detector called a CCD detector, which is a similar technology we used for our camera for the Open Fajr project, then you can actually see the moon the moment it comes out of conjunction, even though it's not visible at all. And then you see it on a computer screen, live, and you say, look, I've seen the moon. So it's more complicated than that. So I think that's maybe a bit of a distinction to how able we are to determine and see the moon, though it's not sightable. So I wonder if it's something to do with about normative sightability. Spectacles revert you back to a normative position, and telescopes, is increasing the magnification, whilst other means actually help you to see it, though any other ordinary means would not be able to see it that way.
So, if there are no further questions or points of clarification, I think we'll wrap up there, thanking both of our presenters and speakers for two wonderful presentations, very eye-opening, both of them. And we'll end with one Surah Al-Fatiha, preceded by a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Al-Fatiha.